Hi, baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. We are so excited to have you join us again for another 1950s Fun Chat. This one is number 165 for us, and we've done a lot of chatting, haven't we, Jackie, to help bring the history of the 1950s alive. Yes, and a great guest is joining us today.
And speaking of all of those chats, if any of you are interested, you can go to the website below, www.wildthewindmillwatch.com, and see all of the previous fun chats, as well as the vendors where you can purchase the book, something about the authors, and where we are going to be appearing as we travel along and talk to folks about the recent history of the 1950s. So up in the right-hand corner, you see a picture of that book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s. You'll also notice a little white spot there, and that indicates an independent press award for as the distinguished favorite in the regional category, and that happened in 2022. But right now, we're going to get on with the show, as someone in the 50s used to say. Every chat has a unique story. And today we're going to learn how a child who was raised on a dairy farm jumped into having an interest in hog genetics. So Ron Smith was born in 1953, grew up on a dairy farm in northwest Iowa near Hartley, and graduated from high school there. 11 children in his family provided many working together opportunities, as well as many opportunities for shenanigans. His family was involved in showing livestock in 4-H. Ron has been involved in farming and raising livestock most of his life. Ron currently raises show hogs near Grinnell, Iowa. Ron has 2 children from his first marriage. They are Jennifer and Javen. Jennifer and her husband, Dawn, reside in Grinnell and have 2 children, Will and Anna. And Javen and his wife, Kathy, have 4 children, Natalie, Monty, Creighton, and Lincoln. And in 2017, his second wife, Cindy, joined the family. So, Ron, we welcome you to the 1950s Fun Chat.
Hi, Ron.
Hello.
Hello. Well, let's begin by having you describe the family dynamics in being a sibling in a large family. As you grew, what were some of your changing responsibilities on a farm? Because as a farm boy in a farm family, you had responsibilities and you learned how to work.
Well, of course, the youngest of years, I don't have a real good recollection of. But I know from the time I was 5 or 6 years old, we had responsibilities feeding cows, calves, and doing outside chores. So we learned responsibility at a very young age.
Ron, did you have to take direction from your older siblings, or was it more from your parents?
It was more from my older siblings.
Okay.
We each fell into our own little category and had our own little responsibilities. And of course, every year it seemed like, one of the family members would move on to college or away from home. So you just gradually moved up the line.
Yes. And then your responsibilities changed too as you got older?
They did. So at the time I was in junior high, my father was disabled. And so he had a lot of hip problems. And so the family did all of the outside chores. We had all of the responsibility, not only for the cows, but the row crop.
Ah, okay. Okay.
Mhm.
And,
So
and
tell me, were the sisters involved in the outside chores sometimes?
My sisters had very limited responsibilities outside, but they
Okay.
cleaned the rooms, made the beds, did all of the indoor things, and the boys did all of the outdoor chores.
okay.
Okay.
To be a part of that size family and to have responsibility that soon in life, was that common in your area in that time?
It was fairly common. I think ours was probably an exceptionally large family, but families of 9, 8, 7 were not all that uncommon.
Okay. What do you remember most about those years in growing up when you and the boys had to do all the work outside?
Um, I just knew when we were called in the morning, you better get out of bed, head to the barn because you only had so much time before going to school. So
Mhm,
so we had to take chores pretty serious.
mhm. And then how did the planting and harvesting times affect you young men as you were in school? Were you still able to get to school on time, or did you take time off in order to plant and harvest?
We did take time off. Um, I can't imagine in today's world that you could miss as much school as we did and not get turned in. But we did miss an awful lot of school doing farming.
Hmm. Hmm.
And we also took turns. I skipped a year and farmed and went back again the next year.
And
So
what year was that, Ron, that you
that
had
would
missed
have
it?
been um, between my seventh and eighth grade.
Mhm. Okay. Did you and your brothers have responsibilities for marketing the crop too, or is that something that your dad did?
That is something that my dad did.
Uh-huh.
Good.
Yeah. And was he pretty much there to direct the operation, or was that you guys' responsibility?
Well, he very seldom was able to make it to the barn,
Mhm.
so we made a lot of decisions that may not have always been correct, but you did the best you could.
Yes, right.
Mhm.
How did that time of learning and growing prepare you for life then after high school?
Well, I've always said that we definitely had a head start on a lot of our classmates because we understood how to work, we understood what responsibility was, and we had learned how to do a lot of things that had to be done.
Hmm. Yes, yes.
With a family that large, I suppose, did you have a very large garden? And if so, did you help with the processing of the vegetables, fruits, whatever you happen to have in the garden?
We did have a large garden. Anybody that's worked a 2-acre garden knows what's all involved. But
Um,
we grew a lot of the food that was necessary for the family,
Mhm.
and and we didn't have a lot of good equipment to make that happen.
mhm.
A lot of hose.
Yes, and backbreaking effort to use that hoe too.
Yes, it was.
So, did you ever feel you had any extra so that you took it to town and sold it to the grocery store and then they in turn sold that? Or was
You
everything
know,
that you
we
produced?
did not. Most of ours, I mean, we would take 2 wagon loads of potatoes and put them in the basement every fall.
Mhm.
My mom would can everything. So we had shelves upon shelves upon shelves in our basement of canned goods.
Did that include
So
meat?
with that,
Did that include a canning of meat?
my mom talked about canning of meat when she was a child, but she never did that.
Okay.
We did have a deep freeze.
Okay.
Oh, that's good.
Yes. Was she a baker also, Ron?
She was.
Okay. What's your favorite item that she made?
Oh, golly. I remember coming back from school when she would have the table laid out with sticky rolls, and it would just cover the table, and they were absolutely wonderful. So we always looked forward to that.
How many of those could
And you all inhaled them, huh?
Yeah. How many of those could you eat at a time?
Oh, back then it was a lot. I don't know what the numbers were, but we consumed a lot.
Yes.
I bet you did. All 11 of you.
Did she ever teach you, the boys, how to bake?
Did the what?
Did your mom ever teach the boys in the family how to bake?
No, back then the boys had the boy responsibilities and the girls had the girl responsibilities. So never got involved in that part of it.
Okay. Ron, were you in a one-room country school, or did you not go to school that way? Was it a town school?
No, I never got involved in a country school. We were 5 miles from town and generally rode the bus.
Oh, nice. Yes, yes. Well, I know you. Jackie, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry, I was going to change topics. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I know you as one who is very masterful with animal genetics. Is there anything from that 1950s era that you think was an inspiration to help you become the geneticist that you are today?
I think it's one of those things that either a person has an interest in that sort of thing. We showed cattle and took them to the state fair. We also had, Dad always bought us show steers. So that was another thing that we worked on. And I was probably the one in the family that took the largest interest in the livestock end of things. And it just grew from there.
Did you make breeding decisions then with your cow herd?
Dad made most of the breeding decisions on the cow herd, but I think I was in 8th grade when he sent me off to put me on a bus and sent me out to Gary, Illinois, to learn how to artificially inseminate. And so I did all of the artificial inseminating in our herd and did some of it for the neighbors.
So what kind of a herd did you have?
Our largest numbers, I think, were 40 head.
And what breed were you
we had
working
Guernseys.
with? Okay.
We had a purebred Guernsey herd.
And was there other livestock then on the farm as well as the dairy herd?
In my youngest years, we did have some pigs on the farm, and that was discontinued by the time I was in junior high, approximately. And of course, we had the show calves and then the dairy that we also showed.
Was there a time that you showed cattle outside of the state of Iowa?
We did in Minnesota because we had district shows. And some of the members of our district were, Hartley's only 30 miles from the Minnesota state line. So.
Well, in those years that you were in high school, a lot of young men like to spread their wings and do some things. They like to explore the world beyond the farm. Did you do
that? As I got into high school, we had more opportunity to do that, but we didn't have a lot of free time. And I was also very involved in sports.
Okay. Such as?
Football, basketball, track.
Okay. Were all your brothers involved in sports?
No, no. I've got an older brother that was involved in football, but I was the one that really took an interest in sports.
It's really neat that your parents supported that, considering the amount of work you had to do at home.
I don't know whether they were totally supportive of that.
Oh,
But this is kind of a fun one, but my dad announced that we were not going to get to play football because we had too many other responsibilities and didn't have time for it. And I happened to have a coach that stopped by on a Saturday noon and said to my dad, he said, Clarence, I know your boy's got a lot of work to do, but we could sure use them on the farm, or we could sure use them on the team. Is there anything that we can work out to get those boys out on the field? And Dad gave in.
nice.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So did all the brothers then participate in sports, or just you?
I had one brother that participated in football with me and actually played on the same team with me.
Mhm.
But and I had an older brother that also played some sports, but I was young enough, don't remember too much about it.
Okay.
I know that you had your family travel together at times. How did they accomplish this with 11 children and mom and dad?
Well, the only time I really recall all of us being in the vehicle together is we always went to church together. So
Mhm.
so on Sunday morning, you dressed up and everybody packed into a 3-seat station wagon and went to town.
Yes. And what was the camaraderie like among you children when you were all loaded into that car?
You know, and of course, I remember more of that from a younger age. And I just remember the car being really hot and us being really packed in there. But we knew every Sunday morning that this is going to happen. We had to pack into that car when we were all going to church.
Did you all have your same positions in which you sat in the car?
You know, I don't recall that. I think the older members of the family probably had priority and got the front seat,
Yes.
and we ended up being on the lap of somebody.
Did you take your milk and cream to town to a creamery, or did did a company come pick it up?
They always sent out a milk truck, and we had 10-gallon milk cans, and
Oh,
we'd keep them in the cooler, and then they would stop by and pick them up and haul the milk to town.
okay.
Do you remember any federal regulations concerning selling your milk?
You know, there was no federal regulations when it came to selling our milk
Oh,
that I was aware of, because we sold milk from time to time to neighbors, and I recall one neighbor that would get milk from us, and we would get eggs from them. So
Oh, sure.
we-
Yes. Well, with 40 cows to milk and eight young men in the family to milk. So you each had to milk five every morning and five at night, or was that am
no,
I my math off?
there was 6 boys,
Okay.
and we were not always all there at the same time.
Hmm.
When I took over the milking, my 2 oldest brothers were no longer living at home, so
Mhm.
so that left 3 of us to do the chores, and generally myself and one of my brothers would do the milking. And we didn't milk. We did have milking machines.
Oh,
They're not the handy modern ones today. You had to carry everything back to the milk house and
mm,
run it through a strainer, and
Mhm.
and so
mhm. Did you ever think when you were that age that you wanted to have a dairy herd when you got older?
Honestly, being a dairy farmer was not something I had given a lot of thought to.
That's a lot of work, obviously.
Yes.
And you milk twice a day?
We did. Every
Okay.
morning and night we had to milk cows.
And did you milk all 40 of yours cattle, or was it usually like a smaller number?
It would generally be in the lower 30s because you'd always have a certain number of cows that were dried up, getting ready to calve.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, what an experience for you, and how that has transferred into what you do in life now. So you have your operation now is with Jennifer and her husband, and their children have been involved and are still involved. How have you been able to transfer this love of genetics and love of working with livestock to them? And how has that happened, if it's so?
Well, I think that would certainly be true with at least Jennifer. I think has always enjoyed the pig projects.
Mhm,
And then she has a daughter that very much enjoys the projects.
mhm, mhm. And you live relatively close to each other, so are you there to advise them, or how do you get along with your daughter in this operation?
Well, I did a lot of advising, and I think she's taken over now and likes to be the advisor.
And how do you receive that? Do you like that?
I just appreciate her having an interest in it, and the more she can be involved, she's got a full-time job,
Mhm.
and the more she can be involved, the more I enjoy it.
Yeah.
So,
What a great relationship.
Cool.
so we're really not in competition.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's great. So a partnership. So the family bonding continues, and the family partnership, the family work, and you're good examples for your grandchildren.
Mhm, mhm. Yes. Tell it. I visited with Jennifer a little bit about how I'm going back now to inside the kitchen in your farm home. And how were your meals served? Or did all 13 of you sit down at the table at the same time? How'd that happen?
We actually always did sit down at the table together.
Mhm.
And so mom made a lot of casseroles. Mom was a very, very good cook. And the food went around, and you better take what you wanted because it didn't go around twice.
Okay. And was all the food passed at the same time, or did you just yeah, and you better load your plates up as it came by?
The food was always passed around the table.
Mhm. In many families, and I think in the era back then, if there was ever company, usually the men and the children ate first, and then the women got to eat what was left. Is that what happened in your family?
I think we, for the most part, always ate at the same time. Mom always got the meals prepared. And of course, as we got older, my older sisters also prepared meals.
Mhm.
So, um, in a large family, the older members always had to take responsibility for the younger members of the family.
Mhm.
But one of the things I look back at and appreciate was the fact that at least once a day, we did have meals together.
Yes. Do you remember what that conversation was like around the table?
Um, I don't always remember what those conversations were. I know when we sat down at the table, we were always hungry, and so there was a lot of food consumed.
Mhm. Yes. And did your mom provide a morning lunch, afternoon lunch, as well as the three other meals?
Um, and that changed from time to time also. Mom would also come outside and work with us more when my older sisters were able to take over some of the cooking responsibilities.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Did you ever feel that your sisters were your mothers? Were your mother?
Yeah, maybe to some degree. Yes.
Did you mind that?
No, no, actually, for the most part, we got along. Most of our fights were boys against boys.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, when you were not in school or not working, was there ever any time to do anything else as a family?
You know, the thing that comes to my mind is particularly weekends.
Hmm.
Our neighbors and friends would love to come to the Smith house because we could always get a softball game going, or during the winter time, we would play in the haymow, build forts. We had a basketball hoop in the haymow of our barn, and so our neighbors that had smaller families, they thought it was a lot of fun to come over because we would always get games going.
Sure.
Good. And did your parents teach you how to play cards?
They did.
Mm-hmm.
We Dad was a big card player, so there again on Saturday nights, it was fairly common to have neighbors come over, and we'd get a good game of 500 or something like that going.
Hmm. Did you go to dances?
We we did not. My parents didn't believe in dancing, so that was something we were not allowed to do.
Yep. Understandable.
When I was a junior and senior in high school, I was able to sneak out on a few of those deals, but for the most part, they were not involved in that activity.
Yes.
So were there community dances that you of which you were aware or not?
There was, and of course we had classmates that got to go, and we always envied that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Ron, what was Christmas like in the Smith family when you were younger?
You know, we generally had a Christmas tree, but we didn't. There wasn't a lot of gifts. The thing that I remember is my older brother and myself would get maybe a tractor and a wagon, and we would share it.
Mm.
And there would always be some puzzles that we could put together on Christmas night.
Mm-hmm.
But because we were a large family, we always found something to do that was fun.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. It's remarkable, I think, to have 11 children and to have what appears to be such a closely knit family. Do you attribute that to anything particularly?
You know, I'm not sure what the reasoning for all of that is. But once we were growing up, I really don't recall any family fights. We all get along. We generally get together a couple of times each year. And because I've got brothers and sisters from all over the United States. So, but we all get along very well.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm. So do when you have a family reunion, it's like half the town coming, huh? Quite a few people, huh? In your
Yes.
family okay.
Mm-hmm. Is there because of the work that you did together, is there a particular fondness for the boys in the family versus the girls?
You know, I'm not sure that would be real accurate. I do think that the boys do more everyday communication with each other, and the girls are very close and they do a lot of everyday communication, but we still all get along.
Uh-huh.
That is super. That is super. Were there a lot of clothes then that were passed down to the next child in the family?
Oh, yes.
Mhm.
Did your mother
Yeah, when you're
sew?
number 8, you didn't see a lot of new clothes.
Yeah. And
Um, and so, um, and at that time, you didn't have the fashions that you do today where brand names are important.
Mm.
And most of my classmates were in the same boat that we were. So,
Mhm.
so wearing clothes that were patched to school
Mhm.
wasn't a big deal.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Did your mother sew? And did your
She did.
sisters sew?
My mom and sisters both sewed, and
Okay.
and did a lot of patching. So
Yes, I
Mhm.
bet. Well, darning of socks, that was a huge thing back then too, to
right,
to to
Mhm.
get
right.
that done. You remember, did your mom use a light bulb to put inside the sock when she
I,
or
I
did
don't recall her doing that.
okay.
Um, she used her hand a lot.
Mhm.
I remember a lot of times when I helped her out threading that needle,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Right.
Well, did what kinds of activities did the sisters in the family do then, other than being there to help your mom in the house?
Oh, golly. I've got a sister that was very involved in math contest. Another sister that was the Guernsey princess for the state of Iowa. Um, so they all had their own little territory that they carved out.
Mhm.
Were you children, any of your children able to take any music lessons? Did you have a piano?
My sisters all took music lessons. I don't think
Mhm.
any of the boys in our family really had a love for wanting to be involved in music.
Okay.
Mhm. Well, there was a lot of you guys were so busy keeping that farm going that
Mhm.
I imagine that was the main focus at that point. Ru-
So I was just going to say, do you have, when thinking of life in the 1950s, is there something outstanding, an activity that happened in your family, or perhaps happened with a neighbor, or some outstanding event that you can bring to mind that happened in the 50s?
The big one that I personally remember is in 1967. We showed the grand champion shorthorn steer in Denver. So
Oh,
Oh
that
wow,
was my big memory.
you
I
bet.
can understand that. Yeah.
Huh.
And how did you transport your cattle to shows?
We would have somebody that would truck them out.
Hmm.
And generally, we had other people in the neighborhood that were also in the show cattle deal that would take these cattle for us to
Uh-huh.
shows.
Okay.
Mhm. Well, Ron, this has been fun to get to know you better and to know your history and how a large farm family had to work together to make ends meet and to enjoy life. And it sounds as though your family did just that and did remarkably well at it.
Hmm.
Do you have any particular thought that really stands out in your mind about the 1950s that influenced you then and is to be the adult that you are?
I don't know how influential this is, but I certainly remember the day when there were three of us boys all slept in the same bed. And of course, there was three of us boys that were born in a 4-year period, and I was the last of the three. So I was the one that got stuck in the middle.
Yeah.
Well, you were kept warm then.
Maybe sometimes too much.
Too much. Huh?
Did you get
The other thing I
yeah.
remember is an old country home where we might bring a glass of water upstairs and find it froze in the morning.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes.
So
Yeah. That's kind of the way it was, but yet then you might say, graduated from that as we got older, and as times changed in this country too, to make it
Mhm.
the more privilege to live in rural America and be able to thrive and survive much easily. Ronald Smith, we thank you so much for your conversation with us. This has been great. And we are so appreciative to you viewers as well, who have taken the time to learn about Ron Smith from Grinnell, Iowa. So thank you, Ron. And
thank
Jackie,
you.
you're welcome. Jackie, how can you close our program?
Glad to have you here, Ron. And viewers, I would like to remind you about that website, www.whilethewindmillwatch.com. Go check it out and check out other chats. And so tell your friends, even your relatives, about this 1950s fun chat. So until next time, toodaloo.
Bye-bye.